Okay, so we've talked about the federal executive branch and regulation, what they regulate, how they regulate through rulemaking procedures, through executive orders, and the scope of it. It can be the scope of anything that the executive branch um, can can do under their authority under the Constitution or their authority delegated by the U.S. Congress. So again, just to repeat, Congress passes the laws, the executive branch enforces the laws, and they do so through their agencies and the rulemaking process and the implementation and enforcement of those rules, and then also by directives from the president. So the executive branch is busy. It's out there doing a lot of things. Who is making sure that they're doing the right things? I've already talked a little bit. We've seen a couple times where the Supreme Court stepped in to rein in the authority of the executive branch. And so let's talk about oversight and accountability. So, Congress giveth and Congress taketh away. Congress creates the laws and creates the agencies that implement and enforce those laws. So Congress has oversight over what these agencies are doing and how they're doing it. They can't direct the agency to act a certain way, but they can question them, they can investigate them, they can make their lives kind of hard. So here you see our Secretary of the Department of Transportation at a transportation oversight committee hearing, probably being peppered with a lot of questions. I don't know exactly what was going on here. Maybe they just had questions and wanted to get answers in a informative way. Maybe it was a political showdown. Maybe something negative happened and they wanted answers. But these agencies still have to answer to Congress in some way. So Congress can't tell them what to do. The president can tell them what to do. The president can issue directives and orders. The president can direct the secretaries and the head of these agencies, because they pick the heads of these agencies, can informally tell them what to do or formally bind them legally with their executive orders. But Congress can still inquire. Congress can still let them know that they're not happy with them. Congress can threaten to take away money, right? Because remember, Congress has the power to tax and spend. So they do have some oversight into these agencies. Again, we've already talked about how the Supreme Court overturned, some of the rules or the reversal of rules. They have overturned executive orders before. So judicial review applies to regulations and to executive orders. Again, they're looking for, did the executive branch overstep the authority that's granted to them by the Constitution or by Congress? Did the rule or the reversal of the rule or the changing of the rule or the executive order violate some other law? For example, the APA, right? That sets out the procedures. If a rule doesn't follow that, the rule is invalidated. The Office of Management and Budget is also another government agency that really takes a look at major regulations just to make sure they're aligning with presidential priorities. So they don't have any power to make the agencies act a certain way, but it's still just another set of eyes looking at what they're doing. What are some of the challenges of executive regulation, and what are some of the criticisms? So, like any government body, sometimes often the executive branch oversteps its authority. It's interesting because we tend to think of the president as the leader of our country. But did you notice how little authority they seem to actually have by the Constitution? They really are kind of subject to Congress. They come second in the Constitution. They can only implement the laws that Congress gives them. They're really supposed to be subordinate to Congress. But we don't always see it that way socially. The norms around executive power have changed. And so sometimes the agencies, sometimes the presidents, they exceed their authority because that's kind of the way we think of them these days. But when they exceed them, they will always be impaired back by the Supreme Court or other federal courts. Another criticism is that they're having too much fun at their job. They're passing too many regulations. Regulations are passed; they're often not taken away, and so we get these excessive rules that can really stifle economic growth. And again, policy shifts. Every time a new administration comes in, the regulations are going to change with administrations. This causes uncertainty. We saw this with the Trump administration. There were a lot of transportation and environmental regulations that were passed under the Obama administration. Industry had started to implement some of those. Trump came in and famously talked about getting rid of a lot of these rules and regulations to make it easier on business. And so, things constantly can be, shifted back and forth. So again, some recent trends. This is a very famous picture of former President Trump saying that he wanted to get rid of regulations. And what you see on the floor there on the left side are the total pages of federal regulations back in 1960 and compare it to today. Regulations are sticky. We tend to pass them. We don't tend to get rid of them. So there has been a push to deregulate, to get old regulations that really don't apply off the books, and also to really think holistically about the regulations that are out there and think, is this good? Is this too much? On the other hand, we're seeing more regulations in the area of climate change and environmental law and sustainability. There's an entirely new focus on emissions and energy, a push for clean and renewable energy, a push for more sustainable transportation, such as battery, electric vehicles and charging stations that go along with them. So that's a trend in the opposite direction. We're seeing actually more regulation in that area. So we're about to have a administration change again. I'm sure we'll see priorities change one more time. So that wraps up our segment on executive regulation. Just to really summarize it for you, executive regulation is absolutely instrumental. Congress passes laws. They pass big, broad policies, but they don't include detailed information on how it's actually going to work. And again, it's by design. Some of these laws have been on the books for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We don't like to change the laws, so we have flexibility with the regulations and rules. While there is some procedure and administration in changing them, it's nowhere near what it takes to pass a law through Congress, which we're going to talk about next. So using the agencies and the rulemaking process to implement the laws gives us a little bit of speed. Speed is relative for the federal government, and it gives us a little bit of flexibility. Agencies are also usually filled with experts. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is filled with people who really know a lot about securities and the markets. The Department of Energy is filled with a lot of experts in that area. So the people making the rules tend to really understand the science or the policy behind these rules that they're passing. So agencies are really specific, and that's a great thing. But we still want oversight. We don't want these agencies to be operating in the dark. We don't want them to be able to forego public participation. So we have laws that are in place, like the APA, that require them to slow down the process, bring it to light, invite public participation. That is what we do on the front end of these regulations. And then we also have oversight on the back end. Congress is always watching. And while they can't tell these agencies what to do, they can strip them of their money, so make sure they can't do anything, or they can just, make their lives a little crazy in the meantime, bring a lot of attention to what these agencies are doing. The judiciary does have the power to stop these agencies if they are overstepping their bounds. So there is oversight to this process as well to make sure that everyone is acting in what's constitutional and what's in the best interest of the public.